afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for being here. We're very pleased to have with us the President of the General Assembly, Abdulla Shahid. He will make brief remarks, and then we will take your questions. Sir, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon to you all, and thank you for coming today. And I think at the start, Paulina has said that I will make brief remarks. It's an understatement. After being in office for 1 year, when I have to speak to you for the final time, it may not be brief, and I apologize for that. My dear friends, thank you for joining me today for my last press briefing in my capacity as the President of the United Nations General Assembly, the 76th session. I would like to thank each and every one of you for your effective, objective, and in-depth coverage of the issues that the General Assembly is seized of. By asking the right questions, you have kept me and my team accountable, and in the process, ensured greater transparency of the office and its workings. You have also helped take the message of my Presidency of Hope reach a broader constituency, and I thank you for that. Given that this is my last briefing, I wanted to highlight some of the work that has been done over the last 1 year. First, let me give you some figures. This coming Monday, 12th September, the day of my handover as the President, will be the last plenary of the 76th session. It will be the 103rd formal plenary meeting of the General Assembly this session. During those meetings, member states would have acted on 304 resolutions and 130 decisions. I convened 15 high-level meetings which covered pertinent issues such as vaccines, climate, commodities, migration, road safety, tourism, food security, and Africa. I also held 27 commemorative meetings, hearings, or special events. I also oversaw 95 intergovernmental consultations and informal meetings as part of the intergovernmental negotiation processes. I appointed 27 co-facilitators and co-chairs to lead on 15 intergovernmental negotiation processes on my behalf. While these are useful numbers to note, I would want to take you back to what the General Assembly was like in September 2021 when I took office. When I assumed office, as you would recall, as the President of the 76th session of the General Assembly, we were still in the midst of COVID-19 pandemic. In many parts of the world, schools and factories were shut. Many lost loved ones. International travel was still not fully open. Debt levels in a number of countries were on the rise, and global economic recovery was trudging along a precarious path. While we were still suffering from the physical and mental toll brought about by the pandemic, we were made unwilling witness to the tragic and unwanted unfolding of Russia's military aggression against Ukraine. Come September 22, the pandemic is still with us. We started with BA1 variant. Today we are dealing with BA5 variant. Vaccination still remains our only hope to tide the pandemic. But at least here in New York, thanks to the generosity of the host government and New York City, we are all vaccinated. The General Assembly is open for in-person meetings to journalists, to civil society, and to the general public. During the last 365 days, my team and I have endeavored each day to deliver on the 5 priorities of my Presidency of Hope. That is, recovering from COVID-19, rebuilding sustainably, responding to the needs of the planet, respecting the rights of all, and revitalizing the United Nations. Whether it was the Holwashi morning dialogues, the Habir Sa evening tea sessions, the town hall meetings with CSOs, podcasts with women leaders making a difference, working with chairs of the 6 UN committees, the presidents of the Security Council, the coordination meetings with ECOSOC President and the Secretary General, I've used every occasion to push forward the United Nations agenda. In the process, I have only been welcomed with open arms. Whether it was with the adoption of the oral decision pertaining to the intergovernmental negotiations on the Security Council reforms, or intervening when the negotiations on the road safety political declaration hit a roadblock, I thank Member States for their strong support and understanding. 76th session saw multilateralism both being put to test and demonstrating its resilience. We saw this play out when the General Assembly, on the request of the Security Council, had to convene an emergency special session, the first in the last 40 years, to address the issue of Russia's military aggression against Ukraine. Amid growing criticism of inaction by the Security Council on the war in Ukraine, the General Assembly adopted a landmark resolution aimed at holding the 5 permanent council members accountable for their use of veto. The resolution, which was adopted by consensus, calls upon the President to convene a formal meeting of the General Assembly within 10 working days of casting of a vote by one of the casting of a veto by one or more permanent members of the Council, and hold a debate on the situation as to which the veto was cast. Let me give you a few other instances where multilateralism and diplomacy overcame challenges. The General Assembly's consensus resolution 76/6 on the follow-up to the Secretary General's landmark report, Our Common Agenda. The inaugural International Migration Review Forum and its outcome adopted without a vote. Adoption of political declarations on united against racism, racial discrimination, xenophobia, and related intolerances. United Nations Ocean Conference, improving global road safety, combating trafficking in persons, as well as a resolution reviewing the functioning of the reinvigorated resident coordinator system, including its funding arrangements, all without a vote. These are essentially successes of member states working together. And there is no other body where this spirit of multilateralism gets reflected than the General Assembly, where each member is equal irrespective of size or influence. For small countries like the Maldives, the General Assembly remains the only viable, neutral international platform to voice their independent views on global issues, and where member states can strive for lasting consensus, respecting the voices of one and all rather than exercising a veto. My dear friends, as the President, I have traveled around the world, meeting not just with government officials, but with people that we are working to help, the people that are driving change and calling for change, we the peoples of the United Nations Charter. I have met with youth advocating for strong action and stronger action on climate change, women community leaders who are working at the grassroots to address injustices in the name of gender, students at schools and universities who are steeped into innovation and eager to contribute to decisions that would impact their future, refugees who long to go back to their homelands but are unrelenting in their determination not to give up hope for a better tomorrow. These are the people for whom the work we do here within these walls matter. That is why I called my presidency the Presidency of Hope, to bring hope at a time of turmoil, and I think that I have worked towards that objective. My dear friends, a project that I was deeply committed to this session was working to bring member states together on the follow-up of the implementation of the proposals in the Secretary General's Our Common Agenda report. As you are all aware, the OCA report is a set of proposals suggested to member states to help create not only give a booster shot to the attainment of sustainable development goals, but also to address the challenges and gaps in multilateral frameworks and pave the way for the United Nations 2.0. And to this extent, I not only worked towards ensuring consensus on the resolutions to follow up on the OCA report, but also post-adoption convened a 5-part series of open, inclusive, informal consultations to see how to take forward the Secretary General's report forward. There were 2 discussions on acceleration of the SDGs, one on leaving no one behind and the other on financing and trust building, one on protecting our planet and being prepared for the future, and 2 discussions on ensuring a peaceful world and enhancing international cooperation. These discussions involved the widest range of stakeholders. We held plenary debates, followed by discussions with the United Nations system representatives, young people, civil society, parliamentarians, private sector, and academics. The goal was to identify initiatives that have broad support among the membership and could start to be implemented right away. Many of those, my dear friends, are well underway by different parts of the United Nations systems now. Among the recommendations for member states to act that gathered support was the creation of the United Nations Youth Office. I'm pleased to report that discussions are now underway and a resolution is due to be considered by the General Assembly tomorrow. The General Assembly has also moved forward with the discussions related to the Declaration for Future Generations and the Summit of the Future. My dear friends, I am a true believer that young people need to be more effectively represented and included in all discussions and the work of the United Nations. During my tenure, I created the PGA's Fellowship for harnessing opportunities for promoting empowerment of youth, which all know as the Fellowship of Hope. You are acquainted with the 8 young diplomats who make up the inaugural cohort. Each has briefed you on the training they received from our partner UNITA and on their educational visit to Brussels, Geneva, and Florence, organized by the kind support of the European Union and the Swiss government. The fellowship has proven to be a great success for 8 fellows, 5 of whom are women. I have more than once said I want to be a fellow rather than the president. I want to be doing what they are doing, learn what they are learning, and going where they're going. I'm pleased with the manner in which this fellowship has shaped up. I'm hopeful that going forward, the fellowship program will be further improved. I'm strongly of the view that this initiative is a win for the future of multilateralism. I'm also hopeful that one day, these fellows who have briefed you would be representing their delegations at the United Nations in some capacity. Or maybe one of them would be a PGA or the next Secretary General. Gender representation and gender balance are also issues that are close to my heart. I'm a fierce feminist and I live with tangible results on this issue. Coming in, you would recall that I promised that I would not sit on any panel organized by my office that was not gender balanced, and I have kept my promise. I promised that I would make the General Assembly more welcoming for feeding parents, with support from the governments of El Salvador and New Zealand in coordination with the Department of Operational Services. We refurbished 8 lactation rooms and opened a new one, the first ever in the General Assembly area. In keeping with the times, I'm also happy to state that sanitary napkins are now freely available in women's restrooms in the General Assembly building. These developments are important not just for us all here, but to show that the United Nations is the gold standard in women's equality. We walk the talk. And I hope that this progress points to the world being ready for a women Secretary General. The next Secretary General needs to be a woman. It is time. My dear friends, my work would not have been possible without the support, commitment, and hard work of my office. Including myself, I had 74 people supporting the office, comprising of secondments from member states and UN agencies, consultants, Hope Fellows, interns, UN-provided security and administrative staff representing a total of 49 nationalities. 55% of my office is comprised of women. That leaves 45 for men. This is the largest and most diverse office of the President in the history of the General Assembly. In doing so, I have immensely benefited from a wide range of expertise and knowledge. I want to particularly thank my chef de cabinet, Ambassador Naidu, and his deputy CDCs, and the entire team. They were simply magnificent in backing me up. I wanted to thank them publicly here. I will be talking about them again on Monday. And with that, let me turn to your questions. As I said earlier, my initial brief is not a brief, it's a long. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. I see hands going up. May I kindly ask, when you ask the question, to please introduce yourself. And as tradition goes, the first question will go to the UNCA president.
Thank you so much, Paulina. Thank you for this briefing, Mr. President, and on behalf of ANCA, thank you for your commitment for this year, and we wish you the best of luck in the next chapter. So my question is, there are two actually. What do you expect for the next UN General Assembly, the upcoming high-level week, and what is the most important achievement in your year as President of the General Assembly? Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. The next UNGA 77, I am seeing the next president, President Chaba, taking office at a time of continued crisis. We have the climate crisis ongoing, the food crisis ongoing, the energy crisis ongoing, the crisis in Europe ongoing, the crisis around the world on peace and security are ongoing. The threat against multilateralism itself continues. It would be a time where the United Nations needs to continue to come together and show to the people what the Charter calls the we the peoples, that the United Nations matters, that the United Nations has credibility, and that people can put their trust into it. And with the able leadership of the incoming president, President Chaba, I have every confidence that the United Nations will continue to do so. And the question about what is the most important achievement of UNGA 76, well, you are asking the President of the General Assembly, who promised to keep hope alive. And if I take one single take from the UNGA 76, is that member states were able to keep the torch of hope alive. Yes, we came through very difficult times, but as I have said in my initial remarks, at very difficult points in time, we were still able to come together on many issues. We were able to come together on issues that mattered for humanity, on oceans, on migration, on road safety, and many, many others, as I have initially said. We were able to push ourselves so that we would be able to come together and make sure that the United Nations is able to show results. Our common agenda, the transformation that we are hoping to move from the United Nations to the UN 2.0, which the leaders of the United Nations aspired for in their in their declaration, 75th anniversary declaration, rather than get stuck on debate, indefinite debate. The 76th session, we have been able to move from debate to action. And I'm delighted that tomorrow I will be able to adopt the resolution on establishment of the youth office. And the other proposals are on track moving forward. So this has been only possible because we have been able to keep hope alive, that this presidency is capable of bringing a sense that together we will be able to deliver a better tomorrow for the peoples.
Thank you. I see a lot of hands going up. I have Edward, Abdelhamid, E.D. Martin. Perhaps I also have people online, Iftikhar and Gloria. I see your hands as well. Perhaps, President, we could pull some of the questions?
No, we'll go individually.
All right.
Yes.
All right, Edward.
Hi, Mr. President. First, congratulations on your presidency. A year ago, when you became the president, you raised the 5 rays of hope, which are the 5 priorities you just mentioned. So, which one do you consider most has the most progress, and which one considered the least? And second, how would you describe your experience as the President of General Assembly, and what advice will you give to the Secretary General as well as the next President of General Assembly to navigate UN during these challenging times? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Edward. Yes, I came promising the 5 rays of hope. I have teams looking after the 5 rays of hope. There was no single ray that I wanted to outshine the other one, because all 5 are important for me and, as I saw, for member states. And each and every ray of hope, we have proceeded, we have made progress, we have had special meetings, events, and I've been successful in highlighting these 5 rays of hope. And in some cases, I've been able to create a continuum where post PGA 76, the rays of hope will continue to shine. And I'm very happy about it. And about giving advice to the Secretary General, look, Edward, the Secretary General has the greatest statesman that I've come across. He's a diplomat extraordinaire. What can a humble person like me give the Secretary General any advice? With the incoming president, he's been a PR here, very long term. He's an outstanding diplomat who is very experienced in negotiations and finding his way through very difficult negotiating processes. I wish the incoming PGA all the best. He has all the qualifications required to take on the reins.
How would you describe your experience as PGA?
Well, I came in knowing that I was stepping into a situation where crises are continuing. As I said, the pandemic, the climate crisis, all this, but never saw the Ukraine crisis. But it has been a journey which I've grown with experience. I had the opportunity of working with the entire 193 member states. If I take one important lesson from my presidency, that is for a short, small person like me, I always needed the moral high ground to stand on to make a difference. And that comes in the form of the Charter and the Rules of Procedure. Stick by it, you get respect.
Thank you, Edward. Abdelhamid?
Thank you, Mr. President. I want to also thank Paulina for her patience with us and for her dedication to give a nice face of the President of the General Assembly. I asked her several times, and I want to ask you this question, if you were able to take this message of hope to areas where they are witnessing conflict, such as I was asking her why you don't visit Gaza to see with your own eyes, the largest human prison on earth. about the people in Somalia, about the people of Rohingya, the people of Kashmir, the people of Western Sahara. Did that message of hope reach these regions where they are really looking for international community's support and sympathy? So how do you evaluate this message of hope in terms of these people who are suffering day in and day out? Thank you.
Thank you, Abdul Hamid. I wish I had time to visit all the 193 countries because everywhere I have visited, I have tried to reach out not only to the government officials, but also reach out to the youth, to the women, people who are suffering. But unfortunately, my presidency is only 1 year, 365 days. I was asked by member states to make enough time here in New York, as well as by member states to travel and relate and take the message to the people that the United Nations make up. I wish I had time and the environment conducive to travel to many of the places that you have mentioned. My recommendations to my successors would be to try and find opportunities to reach out more. But the message that I have tried to convey has been conveyed in many ways. It is not only my personal being there. I have reached out on, for example, Gaza in many forms, including virtual messages and reach out. But sometimes the situation does not allow a PGA or the Secretary General to physically travel to some of the areas that you have suggested. But let us keep hope alive. Let us tell the suffering that we at the United Nations are doing work to make their suffering less. And yes, suffering is there everywhere. I've just returned from a visit to Jamaica, and there I visited a center where the Jamaican government, together with the United Nations agencies and the European Union, are trying to reach out to people, individuals who are suffering from domestic violence. I was greatly impressed by the work they are doing. I was greatly impressed by the strength of individuals who have suffered tremendously in cases of domestic violence, are standing up, coming back stronger and determined that they will not only re-establish themselves, but also help others and prevent situations like that. So yes, we will keep hope alive.
Okay. Thanks, Abdul Hamid. Let's maybe have Edie, and then I have Martin, Maggie, Miriam, Stefano, many others, and we'll go to the screen. So Edie, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Just as a personal thing, we know that you were the foreign minister of the Maldives. Are you still going to continue in that job when you step down from being the PGA? But my two questions are, in the Presidency of Hope and being hopeful, you also have tried to deal with one intractable issue at the United Nations, which is Security Council reform. And I wonder how you feel leaving that issue after a year. And in the Summit of the Future that the Secretary General and you are both supporting, what would you like to see come out of that?
Thank you, Edith. what happens to me after the 12th, you can see me wearing two hats now. So on Monday, after the final plenary meeting, you will see me a little bit exposed because I'll be removing one hat. I will continue to wear my hat as the Foreign Minister of the Maldives. I will be leading the Maldives delegation to the 77th session, and you will see me around for a little bit more time here in New York at the United Nations. On the Security Council reform, as I have time and time again said, we at the United Nations need to adjust to the new realities of the world. And that is why I so passionately believe in the reform of the Security Council. Yes, during the 76th session, I was not able to complete the reform process. There's nothing more that I would have loved to have the Security Council reform process completed during my presidency, the 76th. As I said earlier during my initial press conferences, you would recall that Maldives, my country, was amongst the first 10 countries who signed a request in the United Nations to include an agenda item on Security Council reform. And when that letter was sent, I was only 9 years old. And just look at me and see what has happened to me. The process is going on, but I'm also happy that we made some progress during my presidency. We held more meetings. We were able to have the new creative informals by the co-facilitators, because the process itself is informal. There can't be any informals, so they created the informals where issues could be addressed in a much more open manner. So this new creativity was brought in, and because of the new creative approach, we were able to have a number of divergences moved to the paper on convergences. So these are baby steps, but in a process which has taken over 14 years, one should not have too much of an expectation, but I live in mixed feelings. One, that I have been able to make a little change in the process. I have been able to push member states to agree on the informals, to agree on the convergences, and move a little bit forward. But also with the unhappy feeling that, yes, it didn't happen, that we go into the 77th session. On the Summit of the Future, I hope that the Summit of the Future is going to be an opportunity to rein in I always talk about hope, because I believe that is the only glue that we have to bring everyone together. And when we talk about the Summit of the Future, we should not forget about the 1.8 billion youth around the world. We need to make the youth feel that they are part of this system. And at the Summit of the Future, we should be able to address some of the emerging issues that have not yet been the subject of our discussions, or not have been able to comprehensively address as of yet. It's going to be an interesting summit.
Thank you. Let me turn to the journalist joining virtually. Iftikhar?
My question was about Security Council reform, which my distinguished colleague Edie asked. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Iftikhar. Gloria?
Yes, Your Excellency, I have been in the UN since 1957, and I am so honored to be able to tell you from my heart, you're a great world leader. I have followed all the press conferences, your whole career. You're traveling all over the world, and that initiative must continue with you as foreign minister. My question is, how will we have access to you without pestering you if we would like to find a way to honor you or top organizations to be able to reach you worldwide? How facilitated will the access be to you?
Thank you very much, Gloria, and I'm humbled by the sentiments that you have expressed coming from such an experienced individual in the United Nations system. I truly am humbled. But I must tell you that, as I said earlier, on many occasions, the president is a privileged person who gets all the accolades, but it's the team who does the real work, and it's the member states who does all the work. I just get to take credit for it. Thank you so much. And the one way to get to me, connect to me, would be through the Maldives mission here, through the ambassador. But for you, Gloria, I will share with you my personal phone number.
Yes.
Thank you very much, Gloria. Martin?
Oh, yes. Thank you, Paulina. Thank you, Mr. President, for the press conference, and also, of course, for your great contributions and services. Actually, the first part of my question was asked by Edie, so I asked my second part. So more specifically, after 1 year as the PGA, what reform proposals would you recommend to strengthen the power of the General Assembly? Thank you.
The General Assembly is the, thank you, Martin, very important question. The General Assembly is the universal body where all the member states are represented. During this 76th session, we have seen the P5 turn to P193 in the form of the emergency special session. You would recall that the Uniting for Peace resolution, under which emergency special sessions are convened, the General Assembly effectively is turned to a session where the Charter mandated Chapter 7, the enforcement measures itself, can be taken up by the General Assembly. So this time around, during the 76th session, two important things happened, showcasing the primacy of the General Assembly. One is, of course, the emergency special session after 40 years, where the international community once again relied on the General Assembly when the Security Council failed to address the continuing peace and security issue. Number two is the veto initiative, where the P5, if they cast a veto, according to the consensus resolution which was adopted by the General Assembly, the President of the General Assembly convenes a meeting for the veto casting member to come to the Assembly and explain their position. And this is the word used in the resolution. You would be asked to explain to someone when that someone has the overarching mandate to ask you to. So the primacy of the General Assembly was established during this session, and I'm very happy about it.
Thank you so much, Martin. Maggie?
Thank you, Paulina. Thank you, PGA. Best of luck to you as you move on from here. Building on the special emergency session that you just mentioned, in March, the General Assembly condemned the Russian invasion of Ukraine, and there was other action in the General Assembly on Ukraine, but yet, as we know, the war is still going on. So do you feel that there was any impact by the General Assembly's action? And going forward, do you see a role for the General Assembly in trying to find some sort of end to this crisis?
The General Assembly is still in session. The emergency special session is still on, and it will continue. And whenever a member state requests it to be resumed, it will be convened. And yes, I see a role for the General Assembly on this instance, because the Security Council itself has asked the General Assembly to take over this issue. And you would recall that when the initial resolution was submitted, a total of 141 countries voted in favor of this resolution. The United Nations General Assembly is the international conscience. It showcases the conscience of the international community, which we should not take lightly. Together, when we meet as an emergency special session, we get more powers. But of course, this is an organization which is led by member states, and it's up to the member states to decide which of the powers that they would use, and it is at their option to use. In the past, we have seen the General Assembly come together and use these powers during emergency special sessions, be it the Suez crisis or the Korean Peninsula issue.
Thanks, Maggie. Miriam?
Thank you so much, Mr. President. One of the main issues that you had to deal during your presidency was the issue of Afghanistan. And it is still continuing to today. And as this is your last briefing, what is your message to people of Afghanistan, especially women and girls who don't have much hope left? And also, what do you expect from international community to do regarding the situation in Afghanistan and how to deal with the Taliban, which the talks has been going on for months and years, and still no good outcome came out of these talks? Thank you.
The situation in Afghanistan is frustrating. It is sad. The international community should never, never, never forget the suffering of the people of Afghanistan, especially women, girls, and children. The worst thing that could happen for the women and girls in Afghanistan is for the international community to forget them. So my appeal to everyone is make sure that it is always on the front pages.
Thank you, Miriam. Let's go on this side of the room. Akram?
Thank you, Paulina. President Shahid, I remember interviewing you on the first day in office, and we spoke a lot about hope and what you meant by that. And one of the things you told me back then, where hope comes from in a difficult world like this, you said you come from the Maldives, a country that's always threatened by drowning at any time, and people cannot conceive of living without hope there. So today I want to ask you, in light of that comment, what is your message to a country like Pakistan today, and to Pakistanis, who's the third of their country is now drowning in floods? That's my first question. How can hope help them? My second question is, you also said that you had already met with all 193 member states representatives, and you said back then that no problem in the world would be impossible to solve if we have the political will. And I asked you, is it there? You said, yes, from my meetings, political will is there. All it needs is harnessing. Where is the political will today in light of all the challenges that we're seeing around the world today and the UN is dealing with? Are you still of the same opinion? Thank you.
Thank you, Ephraim. And thank you for reminding me that from day one, I had that positivity of that message of hope. And yes, I'm leaving my presidency on Monday with the same commitment and same positivity of hope and commitment that, number one, we have the potential we have the technology, we have the know-how, and the missing element is the political will. And that political will is possible to harness. During my presidency, I have seen many situations where it seemed impossible. That if we had given up easily, we would have been left without a resolution. And one that comes to mind is very easily the road safety declaration on road safety. Well, when we talk about road safety, it's for many, it may be taken as very lightly, but it's an issue that is prevalent around the world. Millions of people dying, millions of young people getting maimed, disabled because of these issues of road safety. But is it an issue that we will sideline because we have other political issues? My position, no. Let us try and come together on these issues. And I'm very happy that we were able to come together. If you ask me whether I have been able to resolve everything on the agenda, simple answer is no. Did the member states expect me to be able to do it within 1 year? Again, no. But did I try? Yes, I did try. And has this experience of 1 year changed my belief in hope and positivity? No, it has not. It has reaffirmed my positivity. I've come across so many people in such difficult situations around the world, and still trying and doing better. And that gives me hope, and it is renewed. For the people of Pakistan, the recent floods have been devastating. Pakistan produces less than 1% of global greenhouse gas emissions, but its geography makes it extremely vulnerable to climate change. And maybe this is perhaps the worst climate-induced natural disaster in years caused by record torrential rain and melting glaciers in the country's northern mountains. The Secretary General is leaving to Pakistan shortly. I met the Secretary General yesterday. Yes, he is taking a message of hope. He is trying to galvanize international assistance and focus to help the people of Pakistan. 33 million people have been impacted and over 1,000 dead. It's a catastrophe. And this is just a show of what may be coming if we do not heed the warnings that we are hearing on the climate crisis.
Thank you so much. I have Stefano. Stefano, go ahead.
Thank you, Stefano Vaccara, La Voce di New York. Congratulations, Mr. President. Mine is a follow-up on questions that was asked you before. But I'm trying to be, in your answer, I hope you will be less diplomatic, and let's see if your answer now will be satisfied for me. We talked you talked about the powers of the General Assembly, and you showed to us that actually the General Assembly was able to use those powers. But on the crisis, for example, on the crisis of Ukraine, the message out there is that the United Nations was irrelevant, powerless. It couldn't act. So my question is, what is, if during your experience this year, not necessarily on Ukraine, but during your experience this year, what power you didn't have and this General Assembly didn't have that you wish had during this year of work that you had?
Thank you very much, Stefano. You're asking a foreign minister who has been in diplomatic area for almost forever, who is the president of the General Assembly, to be undiplomatic in an answer. That is a very, very tall task. But let me tell you, the whole international system is so complex and so so difficult to relate from one end to the other. If you are in a position of power, you would always like to get things done quickly, effectively, efficiently, and the way that you believe is the best. But then, if you start doing that in the way that you believe it should be done, you're very easily branded as a dictator. And that is why here at the United Nations, at least in the General Assembly, we have a forum, a platform where every member state is equal. And to get the 193 to agree and work and come to a consensus to move forward, either by a majority or even through consensus building, takes time. And yes, it is frustrating. It's very frustrating, especially for the person sitting at the podium with the gavel. There are instances when the person holding the gavel would think, my God, when shall we move? But then if I gavel without consultation and without member states coming together, I will be branded as a dictator in going against the Charter of the United Nations, which is sacrosanct. It's not an easy job. But I'm so happy that during this presidency we have been able to come together on so many issues, despite the fact that the situation is really challenging. Stephanie, I know that my answer wouldn't be what you are looking for.
Thanks very much, Stefano. And if you could please introduce yourself.
Okay, thank you, Mr. President. My name is Cecilia from the News Agency of Nigeria. So I would like to find out from you, what will you consider as your major achievements in pushing for the UN agenda in Africa? Then secondly, how many African countries were you able to visit during your tenure? And lastly, what message of hope do you have for the African continent?
For Africa continent. On the agenda for Africa, I was able to bring together with the President of the Economic and Social Council a special meeting to highlight the Agenda 2063, on which the aspirations of the people of Africa is clearly described. I wanted to make sure that during my presidency, I have a specialized event on Africa to focus the international community on Africa. And I'm very happy that it was a well-attended, a well-participated, high-level meeting where we were able to bring member countries together. And how many countries I visited in Africa? I was able to visit 5 countries in Africa. Once again, I would have loved to visit the entire 54 countries in Africa. But then traveling in Africa, you get to understand how massive the continent is, how divergent the continent is. And it is a continent of so much potential, so much energy, and so much future. You just completely fall in love when you start traveling there, with the people, with everything. It's just so much potential there. And I wish I had more time to travel and connect with the people. I visited Gabon. More than 88% of the country still virgin forest. The government wants to protect these forests. I had an opportunity to go and see the work that they are doing to protect the forest. In Côte d'Ivoire, I was so happy to see the West African leaders come together and sign on to the green wall that they are aspiring for. Planting 1 billion trees across Africa, the green belt. In Angola, I was able to go and see how Kunane River has been, a canal has been built from the Kunane River to irrigate the drought-stricken areas, and how the farmers from the villages are being taught by the UN different agencies to farm the right crops, and how the young generation of babies are being fed the right, adequate, nutritious food. And I saw great things starting to happen in Africa. And I must say, the vibrancy there, the hope that they are on is just outstanding.
Thank you so much. I don't see any other questions in the room or online. President Shahid, thank you very much, sir.
Once again, thank you so much for being with me during the past 1 year, and it's been a brilliant journey, and you have really made me feel at home, and my Presidency of Hope a real success. Thank you, and you will see more of me around. Thank you.